Hello everyone, welcome back to these screencasts. In this one I'm going to just quickly introduce SPSS, not do too much in it, but just quickly introduce you to it so you know what it looks like and have a very basic understanding of what it can do. As we progress through the course, I will do some more sophisticated or essentially linear regression analyses in SPSS, but for today, let's just take a quick look at it. So this is in a Mac, but it looks very similar for a PC as well. So I already opened SPSS. It takes a few seconds to open, just like any other program. And here it is. So across the top, you can see you have different options, just like most programs. These ones would be different, but same type of setup. Under File, you have your traditional options that you might have in Microsoft Word or just about any program. You can create new files, such as a new data file, which is what you're looking at. New syntax file, and syntax is essentially the SPSS language that runs a lot of the analyses we're going to do, and we'll learn more about syntax as we go, mostly in the second half of the course. Then the output files are where you get your results. So once SPSS is done cranking the analyses that you asked it to do, it'll produce an output for you that normally just pops up depending on your settings, but the default are to just pop up, and that's where you get your results. You can open existing files, you can save them as other types of files, for instance Excel or whatnot. You can also get recently used files that you've closed and worked on previously. So there it is. There's several other functions we'll use more so than others. Analyze is where we'll do most of our work, and in particular analyze regression and linear, because this is a linear regression course. That's where we'll spend most of our time. But we'll also use the descriptive statistics a bit. We may use the general linear model as well, but for the most part we'll be within regression. We'll take a look at correlation as well, as that's obviously very related to regression. Okay, there's some other things. We'll use transform to play around with variables, to make up new variables or change variables we already have. It's called recoding as well. So we're looking at SPSS. It looks like a typical spreadsheet. Depending on your experiences with different softwares to analyze data, it may look very familiar or not familiar. But essentially, this is a data view. There's also a variable view that we'll take a look at in a second. So you can toggle back and forth down here. Maybe over here on a PC, I think, if my memory serves right. So essentially what you have variables in the columns. This is where your data will be. And then across you have the individual cases. So let's just make up a variable. Right now they're named the same, but you'll see what happens in a second. So I'm just going to literally type in some numbers. Alright, and let's just do 10 of them. Alright, so there we go. So there are 10 cases under variable 1. This variable could be anything. It could be age, it could be weight in some metric or whatnot. SPSS gives it this default name, and you might guess what this default name would be. So let's just type in some numbers. Alright, so there you go. So now we have two variables, and it's just named it variable 2 with a few leading zeros. And you could go on like that. So here's some data. 10 cases, 2 different variables, and we're in the data view. So you see the actual raw data. If you click the variable view, now we're going to look at, as you might suspect, the variables themselves and some different aspects of the variable. So you have the names, and you can simply click in here and type whatever you might like. So let's call this y. Let's call the second variable x. There we go. I put capitals. It doesn't matter. You can use either one. Another aspect within the variable view is the type of variable it is. Here you can see the default is numeric, and that's because we typed in numbers. If I typed in letters, which you can do, then it will default to something else within the type. Okay, so let's just click in this box and see. When you click in it, you would have saw those 3 dots, and it opens up this new variable type window. You can see that numeric was chosen. The width is literally how wide the variable is in terms of the column space. Back in the data view, we could reduce this because we really only need 2 columns, I believe, is the most we used. but you could expand this if you're using text and you need the variable to contain a very long word or string of letters. You could expand this. You don't have to worry too much about this unless you're dealing with a really large data set, because storage isn't so much of a problem that it used to be. But if you're dealing with a massive data set, you may want to cut down on the size of the file, and you can do that by changing the width. Likewise, decimal places is obvious within numeric. Decimal places tells you how many places past the decimal point you want to go to the right. Here we could put 0, or we can just leave it as the default too. I'll just leave it as the default. The other type of data we'll use a lot is string, and all string means is that it's a text. It's not going to recognize numbers. It's just going to recognize the text that's entered, and that could be a string of letters, letters and numbers, actual words. So if you have a variable, for instance, that's gender, male, female, you can type in the actual male, female. You can't do a lot of analyses with it. You can do some, but not a lot. But you can use string variables, and we'll use string variables in mostly in the second half of the course, but we may see them before. We'll see. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as numeric. You can see some other choices here. You can use currency, you can use scientific notation, you can use date variables, etc. So there's other options. Okay, so it's numeric with 8 decimals too. If I changed it back in that pop-up box, these would change accordingly. The label is a area that's quite useful, and you can type anything in here you want, and it essentially is usually uses a descriptor of the variable itself. So this is just a variable for demonstration. All right, that's all. So x is a variable for demonstration. I could spell it right for one thing, but I could also put a label or description here for x if I wanted to. Values we may come to later, but essentially you could assign values to something like a Likert scale. So for instance, if you had a Likert scale from very dissatisfied, somewhat satisfied, very satisfied, you could assign, for instance, a 1 to very dissatisfied, and then values all the way up to very satisfied, if you like. I mean, that's not applicable here. Missing talks about if we have missing data. You can assign a value to a missing data if you want, but we won't get much into that in this course. Columns is very related to width of the variable. Alignment is exactly what you might think it is if you just want the data itself to appear aligned to the right, left, or center. So right now it's to the right. Measure is going to come in and be an important aspect. What it's talking about is the scale of the variable itself. What type of variable is it? A scale is usually a continuous variable. You should have been introduced to this different scales of measurement in the past. Ordinal is a situation where the numbers are ordered, meaning they go in a specific order. Obviously, nominal, you don't even have that order. You essentially are assigning numbers to nominal things like 1 to female and 2 to male, etc. These both can be scale variables. If you're having trouble doing an analysis and it won't let you essentially move forward with the analysis, one thing to do is come and check the measure, because if you have a nominal variable, it won't allow you to do some of the analyses in which they're not applicable to nominal data. So just come back and check that if you're having some trouble. Don't worry about roll right now. Okay, so I've changed the names, I've put in a label. Let's go back to data view. There you have it. Okay, now I'm not going to do it, but you could save this file if you wanted to, and save it just like you save other documents that you work on, and put it wherever you want on your computer. But I'm not going to do that now. Okay, so let's just very quickly do one or two more things within Analyze. So let's start very basic. Within descriptives, we could conduct a bit of frequency analysis. What's frequency? It tells you how many times a particular value within a variable comes up. So one thing that'll jump out at you right away is, for some reason, x is just x, but y is this variable for demonstration. If I hover, it'll tell me the whole thing, and then it gives me the variable y. It's not that important here, but when you have large data sets with lots of variables, you may want to either display the variable names here or the labels. It is displaying the labels now, and that's the default, as you can see, and the reason there's no that X is here and there's no label is because I didn't enter one. So there literally is no label back here. So it's just choosing the variable. So let's just, I think I'll just go like this. So I have X and Y. All right, let's send them both in. And SPSS is giving you a little bit of a hint that these are scale variables. If you remember, that was the little icon for scale when we were talking about the measure of a variable. Okay, we could just run frequencies, and see what happens. There's going to often be lots of choices here. Sometimes lots, sometimes few. Let's just check out statistics. So, as you may have guessed, we could add some things like this. And what that'll do is not only will we get the frequencies of the values within the variable y and x, but we'll also get some other statistics about our variables. Alright, let's just hit OK and see what happens. What happens? The output pops up. So we asked for these statistics by clicking those boxes. If we hadn't clicked on or checked those boxes, this wouldn't appear. So we see that we have 10 cases. We have no missing values. We know the mean now of variable for demonstration, which remember is y, is 5.1, median, etc. For x, mean of x is 56.1. Okay, frequency table. It's not terribly interesting here. Essentially, here we have 1, 2. We happen to have 2 3s. Let's say one here and one here. So that's what a frequency table tells you. Now, one thing to note is it does give you percents. This percent and this differ in that here, if there were missing values, it would be included. Valid percent gets rid of those missing values. So in this case, it's the same because we didn't have any missing values. But if we did, maybe I'll show you that real quick. These two would be different. Cumulative is that if I want to know how many 2s and 3s there are, there's 30% of these variables are 2s and 3s. Okay, and that makes sense. There's actually 3 of them. 1 plus 2. There's 1, 2, 2 3s. That's 3 of those. 3 out of the 10 is your 30%. Likewise, 5 all the way up. Of course, the last one will be 100%. Okay, we have the same for x. So you can save it, of course, if you want. I'm not going to. Let's do this just for fun. And let's go back to frequencies. Now notice it has saved everything I did from the last time, including things I've checked here. If I want to reset it and start it over and not remember anything I did last time, I can simply click reset, but I won't. I'll hit OK. Alright, just to show you that if I have missing data, our percents change a little bit. This percent includes the missing. Alright, and so 10% of the data is missing. One case in this case, 1 out of 10. Alright, valid percent calculates it as if there's only 9 cases. It gets rid of that missing. And so the missing value isn't included. Likewise, cumulative uses the valid percent. Alright, last thing I want to show you real quick is descriptive statistics. So descriptives, and again, it's going to go back to the default. You can change it. You can actually go into some settings and change the defaults. So you can change the default to be that variable always appears. Likewise, in the output that we saw, and we'll see in a second, you can change those defaults as well. So let's put these in. Descriptives, and let's go check out what we can get. Notice this is very similar to those statistics that were at the top of the frequency chart. So you have different statistics here. Let's just do OK, and let's do this. Alright, there you go. So notice, here, the default for SPSS is that it'll show the label if there's a label. This is y, remember? This is the y variable. Here's the label I entered for it. Here's x. You can go into some settings within SPSS and change the default to be variable name if you like, or leave it as is. Now x doesn't have a label, therefore it just gives us x. Okay, likewise what you have here, there are 9 valid cases. It takes the minimum of the 2 situations because we still have that missing value there, and gives us a descriptive stats. Okay, I think that's good for a very quick intro. And next time we'll move on and maybe do some correlation within SPSS. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk with you soon.